all non-Jews were kicked out, like 750,000 Palestinians at that time, the greatest influx of Palestinian, of any population actually, percentage-wise in the history of that region at that time. And our family became part of the refugee population. And I shared this story because I want to share one of the sort of pinnacle points of how the family has engaged for many, many years. And it goes to my grandmother. My grandmother was a woman that always insisted, as a family, we will never seek revenge and retaliation for what happened to us. That revenge and retaliation was not going to get anything back that we had lost. Her husband, the property, the house, everything that we owned. Also, my grandmother always insisted that as a family, we will not look away from experiences of injustice and violence, that we will proactively seek peace and reconciliation with those who have done this harm to us. And that's the family that I grew up in. As a child, it wasn't easy. It was quite challenging to understand that, in a way, I'm living two narratives. One narrative that says there is a reality that justifies my hatred to them because what they're doing to us. And there is a narrative of the family that says seek peace with those who are doing this to us. And it wasn't until this guy sitting in the back over there, Mubarak, the guy that I blame for everything I am in. When I was 12 years old, opened the Palestinian Center for the Study of Nonviolence in Jerusalem. And I began to participate in many of the nonviolent activities, where I saw in nonviolence there is a way to resist the occupation and injustice that we face. Of course, the biggest turn for my life was when the Israeli government arrested my uncle, declared him a threat to the national security of Israel, and deported him, kicked him out from the land, never allowed to return and live in the land of his ancestors, even until this day. Other than a tourist, he's not allowed to come back. That made me commit my life to nonviolence. I wanted to really understand what is the power of nonviolence, how do we engage in nonviolence, what makes the other side so afraid of nonviolence. And I began my journey. Ultimately, the journey led to jumping many years after to starting an organization, many of you know, called Holy Land Trust in Bethlehem, committed to follow the teachings of my uncle, committed to engage in nonviolent resistance, activism, to resist the Israeli occupation. And for many years, this was my work. Actually, I was in the organization for 25 years, teaching nonviolence, engaging in nonviolence, and beginning to look into other aspects of the conflict that many people had not looked at before. One of them was looking into collective trauma, how collective trauma, it shapes identity, how collective trauma doesn't just shape my identity, but shapes how I perceive the other. And I shared many, many times with many people how one of my profound experiences was when I went to the death camps of Auschwitz and Birkenau, not just learned about the history of the Holocaust, but began to see how the Holocaust is being used, and I will even say abused, as a tool of indoctrination into fear of the other. Israeli teachers teaching Israeli children, again, not just the history of what happened to us as Jews on the hands of Nazi Germany's, but how this is a continuous story. Hearing Israeli teachers say, if the Palestinians have an opportunity, they'll do to you what the Nazis did to your ancestors. Imagine being a 13-year-old child going on a school trip somewhere and being told that any Palestinian, any Arab, any Muslim is a threat to you as the Nazis were to your ancestors. And that was shocking for me. And so a big part of my journey, and I'm going to explain later how shocking this is in the current context. So I began to engage in collective trauma healing work, bringing Israelis and Palestinians together for dialogue, for engagement, for co-resistance and for engaging in collective healing with each other, to understand that part of our peacemaking is how we liberate ourselves from the narratives that we have inherited, that demonize and dehumanize the other. And that continued for many, many years, and I stayed in it and engaged in it. And I'm going to be very also transparent with people here, because this is what I believe in. A lot of this work that I was doing, as much as I believed in it, was not accepted by many Palestinians. Many Palestinians saw this work as normalizing, as collaborating. Some even called it treason, because I'm engaging with Israelis and not just resisting the occupation for the sake of resisting and ending the occupation. And it was very challenging for me. How do I engage with Palestinians and Israelis at a time when we saw the violence continue, when we saw settlements continue to be built, when we saw extremists rise within the Israeli political system, and still believing that there is hope, there is a possibility. Let us meet, let us engage with, let us talk with. And I'm going to jump all of this to October 7th. And what happened on October 7th, and what happened since October 7th, that many of you are aware of, many of you are following, many of you are engaging in, and all of you almost have done something about the tragedy for us as Palestinians after October 7th. October 7th was a tragic day on many, many fronts. As a person who doesn't believe in violence, October 7th and what happened on October 7th was a tragedy. To see people die is not something I would ever believe in. That's my commitment to nonviolence. I believe in resistance. I don't believe in the harm that we can cause to others in our resistance movement. And we could talk a lot about what happened and how it started and what led up to it and all of these things, but that day did happen. On October 7th, I had several thoughts that came to me immediately. The first thought was to reach out to my mother's family in Gaza. So while my mother lived, of course, we lived in Bethlehem, her brother, her sister, my cousins, their families, they lived in Gaza. That's where she was from. And I called my cousin, his name is Ramzi, and I said, Ramzi, you need to leave. Find a way to get out of Gaza. And like many Palestinians who live in Gaza, who've been living under 16 years of blockade, every 2 years they get bombarded by the Israelis, Hamas, or somebody shoots a few rockets, the Israelis bombard them, and then the world tells them to stop, and we live in a couple of years. He said, don't worry, Sami, it's the same, it's going to be the same. I said, no, this is not going to be the same. This is going to be different. Of course, they couldn't find a way to get out of Gaza. It took us many months. They had to leave their home. They lived in tents, including an uncle who's 88, my aunt who's blind and deaf. They had to move from area to area, from tent to tent. And I would say that was the luxury of the genocide, what they were experiencing compared to what happened after that. We were able to get them out from Gaza a week before the Rafah border was closed. And they're in Cairo now, and of course we're trying to figure out what to do with them, but we know if they stayed in Gaza, they would have perished. So many of us knew from the beginning that this is going to be an unprecedented disaster. One of the statements that I used to say in the past, and I still say it now, but I never imagined it would lead to what it's leading to, is when you bring absolute fear and combine it with absolute power, you create absolute disaster. Now I used to say this, and I was to say, when you bring the fear and the trauma and the indoctrination of the Jewish community in Israel, and you bring mass weapons to a community that has been indoctrinated into an ideology of fear, it's going to lead to a disaster, which makes sense. But honestly, I never ever thought the disaster would be at the level of what Gaza has experienced since October 7th. the genocide, the killing, the inhumane, beyond humane actions of the Israeli military and soldiers and government towards Palestinians, for me, is actually unprecedented, maybe even in history. So that was an amazing and very, very shocking tragedy. One thing to also point out to that made me begin to, again, ask questions. The second thing that came to me that I began to ask questions is what happened to Israeli activists? What happened to the Israeli peace movement that was engaged with us, that was connecting with us, that many of them were coming to my house and staying in my house. We would do work together, we would engage together, we would do collective trauma healing together. We would plan together, we would dream together of the future we want to create together. At one point we were even called a community, Israelis and Palestinians who would meet continuously. One of the biggest shocks was to see, I'm not going to say all of them, but so many of them, so many abandoned ship within days of October 7th. It was a shock. At a time when you think this is when we meet, this is when we come together in the face of the violence, and I'm going to say the violence by both sides. In that moment, this is when we come together. This is when we come and bring hope. This is when we become and resist. This is when we become and show resiliency. This is when we stand in the face of empire. Many of them abandoned. Many of them became either absolutely silent or even, I'm going to say as bad, not worse, begun to justify. Only if you did not, like me. We have to do this. To achieve peace, we have to destroy. Yes, we know that there will be innocent, that will be, we feel bad about it, but we have no other choice. It was deeply shocking for me. Deeply shocking. And to understand again how the narratives continue with each other. One of the Israeli organizations that we worked with was an organization called Talking Peace. We used to come together and bring Palestinians and Israelis, and usually at the religious level, and usually at the religious people who were radical, not your rabbis for human rights and Muslims for peace groups. These are the radicals from both sides. We used to do meetings and bring them together to talk peace, to engage in trauma healing with each other. The head of this organization was in my house many times. We would talk peace. And many times I would tell him, what about the radicals? We were talking to some radicals, but what about the rest? And his argument was always his excuse, and maybe he believed this. He said, those are the ones on the fringes. They're the 20-25%, the extreme settlers, but not all settlers are like this. The extreme right wing, but not everybody's like this. That was his argument that he would make. 2 weeks after October 7th, I reached out to him just to check on him, to see what's happening, what can we do in the midst of now the genocide that we're facing. And he sent me a message. He says, I want you to know I sent my sons to Gaza, and I can't wait for them to tell me how many they killed. Talking peace, a peace activist. This is, and many, many others. There is one story, because I never want to just also draw a black slate on all of them. One Israeli activist, his name is Amit, he's a friend. He sent me a message on October 8th. He said he's too embarrassed to even call me. And in this October 8th, before the dust had even settled, before we even knew what was happening, what the results of the day before were, he sent me a message and he said, I'm sorry for what we're going to do to you. If you never want to talk to me again, I understand. But that voice was rare. It was very, very rare to have an Israeli, from the beginning, acknowledge this is a genocide that we are going to do to you. Very, very few. Most Israelis abandon ship. And all of these things just made me begin to question. To really begin to ask questions. The two statements that Netanyahu made on October 7th to address the people, his people, which I say are two people, Americans and Israelis, his people. The first sentence he said, this is our second Holocaust. You probably heard this when he came out and said, this is the second Holocaust committed to us. Tapping again into the narrative of fear that was embedded in every Israeli from the time they were born, when they went to Auschwitz, like all of them do, when they joined the army. One day they're going to do this to us as what happened to you. That story, that language, that conversation. It was like a code that unlocked. And in that moment they began to, that's why many of our friends abandoned. It became an existential threat. It became us and them. It became Nazis against Jews. All those stories of what they inherited had returned to them. The second statement he said, which I hope all of you heard him say, is this is our 9/11. These are the two sentences he said. What did he mean when he said this is our 9/11?
Cut loose.
We are going to do what you did. Don't even think about stopping us. What you did in Iraq, what you did in Afghanistan. And he said this, publicly he said this. You coming to tell us what to do, how to behave? Look what you did. And comparing it, again, Muslims, terrorists, Arab terrorists, this is Judeo-Christian thing. He used biblical language to even compare it and put the Americans, well, I wish he put the Americans on the side. He took the Americans out of the picture as long as you pay for the war itself. You pay for the genocide. So all of these things for the last 2 years have put me in a place of deep reflection, asking questions. What happened? 25 years of engaging with Palestinians, Israelis, many beautiful things. Joint activism, resistance, Sumud, the freedom Sumud camp that we created, inspired by Standing Rock and what happened here, bringing Israelis, Palestinians, internationals to come together and to protect Palestinian villages in Masafar Yalta and the southern Hebron Hills that were being attacked. Where did we lose it? Where did we miss it? And I'm not saying this to say that we failed. I think part of who we are as activists, we need that space to be able to reflect back and ask these questions and ask, where do we go from here? Where do we move forward? And so one of the decisions that I made, it wasn't easy, but for me it is the right decision, because as an activist, I began to realize that a lot of my life was bending my back for the other, creating the space for them, creating opportunities for them, holding them when they were being challenged by their own community for supporting us as Palestinians. Creating the space where I, as a Palestinian, represented what they needed for them to be able to speak in their own community. You know, the token Palestinian. Here is a good one. We wish everybody was like him, but at least here's one that we could use. You know, carry me on stage and put me on stage to say that this is, again, unconsciously I wasn't aware of it, but this is the role I was playing. I was sharing also how big of an ego trip it is to be in these spaces, to be honored in these spaces, to speak globally as a peace activist, as an activist. People like that. People like that language. And especially if you put the Christian part in it, you know, a person who's a Christian, a Jesus follower who's engaging in peace work. All of these things, you know, a big ego trip that I was experiencing, and to say no, and to say no. And so one of the first decisions I made, and this is where I want to encourage a discussion to happen of where we are as activists in anything that we are engaging in. Because I think one of the challenges of us being activists is we learn that being nice is good. It's a behavioral issue. I think Paul yesterday was telling me that there isn't any biblical verse where it says Jesus was nice.
Nice is a 4-letter word and it's not found in the Bible.
Yeah. And it's not to be kind, it's not to remove our values. But I think many of us in this movement, we again bend our backs to the others to create space. And again, I'm talking Palestine, Israel, but it could be whatever issue you are engaging in that is a justice issue in your life. Gender issues, racial issues, ethnic issues, MAGA issues, you name it. That we always have this thing where we feel that dialogue is a key aspect of our engagement. And again, not to critique dialogue, it's very important. But I think it sometimes becomes the thing we go to and then see what else can be, instead of really asking the question, are these people ready for us to engage in dialogue with them? Not, are they ready, but are they ready for what we want to say? And so for me, one of the decisions that I've made was, except for Amit, the person that I talked to you about, no Israelis are welcomed in my house. I do not want to be the token that they use to justify their desire to make peace with us. If you are committed to peace, if you are committed to justice, if every Palestinian was Hamas, every Palestinian hated you, every Palestinian wanted to kill you, if you are committed to peace and justice, and this is a value that you carry, you work for it. You engage in it. You create the opportunities for the other to see you as an Israeli, for your humanity, for your engagement in justice. Not because there is peace activists on the other side I want to engage in peace. And if they don't exist, I step out. Because that was a big lesson for me on October 7th. The second lesson is connect with my community, my Palestinian community. By engaging in this back and forth, calling myself a bridge between the two, or being called a bridge, I lost touch with the heart of my people, the pain of my people. And for me, it became very, very important the last 2 years is to reconnect with the Palestinians, to sit with them, to engage with them. One of the things that I've created with other Palestinians, it's called the Palestinian Councils, where we create space for Palestinians to just come together, to share with each other, to grieve with each other, to dream with each other, to ask the question, what does it mean to be Palestinian? Because the divisions have been so strong amongst us for the last 100 years. One of the successes of Zionism was really dividing us and separating us. And so one of the things we do now is we've created these councils, not just in Palestine, but also in the diaspora. The diaspora, Palestinians that have been forgotten for years, thinking that for some reason we bought the lie that if we fix our problem, the Palestinians that live inside, then somehow their issue will be resolved, go on the back burner. It was never going to be resolved. That whole peace process was a sham, was a lie that we were sold. And so we've created these councils in Palestine, we've created in Jordan, in Abu Dhabi. Next week there's going to be a Palestinian council created in Portugal that I hope I can be able to go to. And maybe in the US we'll start creating these councils where Palestinians come together. We have to deal with our issue. We are a population, a people's group now that is really experiencing an existential threat. And I don't say this lightly. You know, many people who know me here know me as the person who always talks about hope and hope and hope. We are reaching a very, very tragic point in our journey as a people group. Another thing that I'm proud to be part of He's also joining Nonviolence International, my uncle's organization that he started, working with the team that is here, and to really look into what we are doing globally as well, as an organization. And to really understand, and this is sort of the point of the conversation we're having today, is that this is not just Israeli occupation of Palestinians. This is not just what Saudi Arabia is doing to Yemen, or what's happening in Congo, or what's happening in Sudan, or what's happening here and there. This is a struggle in the face of empire that we are facing. And tonight, on this day, we are in the belly of the beast. This is the heart of it. And I actually want to challenge us and to say that while we were engaged in, I don't want to say distracted, engaged in other situations and conflicts and tragedies around the world, as activists, there was growing darkness and injustice happening in this land. And this is what we see with ICE, this is what we see in Minneapolis, this is what we see across the states. As a person who comes here every once in a while, I don't live here, it's good to have sort of this bird's eye view from the outside, coming back and seeing the separation, seeing the hatred, seeing the resentment that is taking place, seeing how people look at each other. At airports, when I'm flying at airports, I've never seen like people, how they look at somebody who is ethnically or racially different than them. It's shocking. You might be so embedded that you might not notice it, but it is so true and so real. And this whole Christian nationalist movement that is growing. And again, similar to what my friend was saying, well, my ex-friend now, from Talking Peace, these are just right-wing extremists. Nobody listens to them. Nobody cares about them. You know, they're doing their own thing. You know, as you know, they're becoming as mainstream as can be, and as frightening and as dangerous as can be. And so, for me, the question is what needs to happen here. For me, the liberation of Palestine is very much connected to the liberation of you.
That's right.
Liberation here from these insane, right-wing, radical, whatever you want to call them, groups, is what will actually lead to Palestine. And we've been saying this, criticizing Christian Zionism, attacking it, but how do we step also out of the place where we are able to say, no, this is enough. The space of confronting those who are doing the injustice. And this is, again, my joy of working with Nonviolence International, because it is about resistance, it is about activism, it is about action. It is supporting groups in the United States and across the world that are really standing in the face of fire and saying no. The work we do in Palestine with the unarmed civilian protection, that Adam is going to be burdened with the responsibility for, to raise funds for internationals like you coming to Palestine and standing with Palestinians to face the radical settlers, is amazing. And it's very much connected. We're going to have, I think, a webinar next week. Monday, of comparing the situation in Palestine with Minnesota, to say, look at the lines of connection. Look how, and not to compare the tragedy as a tragedy of it, but to compare the tactics and the tools of systemic violence in both communities as the same. What are we doing about it? The flotilla, an amazing experience of people who say, we are not giving up no matter what. And we all know what's going to happen to the flotilla when it goes to Palestine or to Gaza in April. We know. But just the fact that a group of people, and growing every year in the hundreds, are saying, we're still going to do it. We're still committed. This is the power. This is the power of standing in the face of empire. And to begin to ask the same questions here. What are we doing? I'm going to end, and I'm going to apologize, because I always say I'm going to end, and then after I say the sentence, I say again I'm going to end, and then I say I'm going to end. So you might get like 3-4 endings. I'll try not to make too many. To share also on a personal level, that over the last 10 years I've been also exploring the teachings and the ways of Jesus. Not as the Christian Jesus, but as a Palestinian Jewish rabbi who lived 2,000 years ago in occupation, who was also very spiritual. And for me, this journey of exploring, because I think it's very important for us to understand that when we resist systems of oppression, we resist them, and what usually happens after our winning is new systems of oppression emerge. We have to be honest with this. There hasn't been, as they say, the war to end all wars, as they say, or the liberation movement to end all liberation movements. And for me, it became a question: what happens? Why do we keep going back to violence? Why do we keep going back in this cycle? Why do we actually believe, or some people believe, that this time is going to be it? And then 20 years, 30 years, 40 years, 100 years later, we're in the same cycle. More violence, more oppression, more segregation, more separation, more power, more fear. And so for me, the research has been to really begin to ask the question, what is it that we could do to also create a consciousness that is different than the consciousness of violence and separation that we are all, in one way or the other, part of, embedded in. The consciousness of the us versus them, the good versus the bad, those who are right versus those who are wrong. And we all have that in us. We all have the I am better than them. They are bad, I am good. We all have that. But to understand that this consciousness is also what keeps the cycle of violence alive. And so for me, in studying the teachings of Jesus, one thing that I really began to see in him, and the first line of the book that I wrote was, for me to understand Jesus, I had to step out of Christianity.
Yes, I love it.
Enough already of the institution of power and domination, patriarchy, and you name it. And in studying Jesus, I began to see, and this is where I want us to be encouraged in our activism, that yes, he was called a peacemaker, he was the Prince of Peace. In Islam, in Christianity, this is how he is revealed. But he was also very, very, what's the word of this? Beyond tough. Strong, committed, clear. He never bent his back for anybody. He did what he believed in. And his journey was one where he engaged with others. He met with others. He connected with others. He debated others. It was said, I say, you said this, I said this. He challenged them by doing things that violated and broke the law, like healing on the Shabbat, doing things that the law said he shouldn't do. But at the end of the day, there was a moment when he said, I have to do something beyond all of what I have done. I cannot continue this game with the leaders, healing somebody on Shabbat and then criticizing me, and then we move on, or saying something from the Old Testament and then saying something else and moving on. And what did he do? What was the last act of resistance that he did? He went to the heart of the beast, the temple in Jerusalem, and turned the tables over. And for me, this teaches us that, yes, we are called to forgive, we are called to tolerate, but we are called to also stand when the time comes for us to stand and turn the tables over in the heart of empire. And what is empire for you? What is empire for me? What is that institution, the ideology, the religion, the belief system that I am part of? Because he didn't turn the tables over in Rome. He turned the tables over in Jerusalem, in his own community. turn the tables on his religious leaders. So what does that mean for us? That's the question that I'm living in. And what is the courage that we need to be able to do that? Because many people, we will resist the other side, but on our own, we need to work with them. We need to include them. I was in Durango, Colorado, in one of my stops, and one of the local pastors, a woman pastor, engaged in peace work and dialogue, and she stood up beautifully, and she, as I was sharing this, she was saying, as a Christian, she was saying, but they are our brothers and sisters in Christ. And my response in the past would have been, yes, they are, and we need to engage with them. My response to her this time was, are they? Really? Do you really, really believe Christian Zionists who advocate for murder and killing and violence and genocide and supporting this war in Iran as the ushering of Armageddon? Are they really, really? And I'd like challenging in front of the crowd. Are they really your brothers and sisters? Well, really think about it. I'm going to ask you to go turn the tables. So I think I will end with here, Michael. No more another ending. And just to thank you for being here, for the space, and thank you for all the work that all of you are doing. I know when I come here, I'm talking to people who are living day by day in the midst of violence and fire and being challenged in everything you believe in by others. And the fact that you are still holding on and doing the work you do is a great encouragement for many of us around the world. So thank you.
Bravo. Bravo. So,
time for questions and answers, discussions. Say your name and go for it.
Ann Wilcox, hello. I was hoping to come over in April with Pilgrims of Ibilene, that group, and also hang out at Reimagine. So maybe I will see you soon. But inshallah. But and talking about turning the tables, I think if you relate to Martin Luther King's story too, he's talked about nonviolent resistance, good trouble. Not just turning the other cheek, but pushing back in nonviolent ways. So I think that's an important parallel that we can use in our country.
Exactly. If you learn Kingian approaches to nonviolence, it was always about talking with them, engaging with them, making your grief known to them, and seeing what they give you in return. And the moment you don't, you take it a step up, take it a step up, take it a step up. And so, yes, this is what nonviolence is. And this is my issue, because a lot of our nonviolence has been diluted over the years. It's become a protest, a demonstration, what's it called? The King's thing here?
No
Kings rallies that maybe not in Washington, but in many areas it's become like this sort of balloon festival, and it's nice. Michael says something better than nothing. I agree, but then there's always the question, as we also agree, what comes after that?
Yeah.
Do people go home? And to understand that those who are in power, they see what we're doing. They're assessing what they're doing. They have strategists who look at what we're doing. And if they see an action happening once every 3 months where people go on the street and hold signs and then they go home and there isn't the upscale of it, there isn't escalation of it, they're fine, let them do it. This is democracy, this is freedom of expression, we're letting them do what they want. And so they actually tap themselves on the back. And so it becomes important, and I really think at these times we don't have the luxury of just holding events and activities, and it takes a lot. And then one of the things that takes a lot, which again is a word that many people don't like to hear, is what are you ready to sacrifice? What are you ready to sacrifice? And this is a triggering word for many Westerners. And I know many of you sacrifice a lot. But for others, no. They're not ready, including relationships with their family members. They're not ready to sacrifice. I'm not talking about prison time like many of you have done, or more. But even small things that they are not ready to put on the table.
Okay, I have a question around. Oh,
in DC, criminalizing our youth. In DC, they have a juvenile curfew. I'm in a big fight with DC City Council about it regarding the violation of our children's rights. But essentially, they're putting posters around the city, and they can call an emergency on the hour. And then our youth are just being arrested for going into rich neighborhoods. And they're Black and brown youth. And then we have the National Guard here, so they're chasing them around with guns. And there was like some famous video that hit it. And I'm just curious about that as a tactic, right? Because all these youth are just going about life. Some of them live in those neighborhoods. Some of them don't even have phones, so their parents don't know where they're at. And technically they have rights that would stop this from happening, but council doesn't want to acknowledge the rights. So I'm curious how that has been used, because you know the yellow posters made me think of the yellow line in Gaza, right? And it's just such a horrible tactic.
Yeah, so thank you for connecting it straight to Gaza, because that was exactly what my idea was, where we as Palestinians in Gaza and also now in the West Bank are completely limited in what access we have and where we can go and where we cannot go. And this is not just the Palestinians that are living in the ghettos of the West Bank. This is also the Palestinians that live in Jerusalem and the 20% Palestinians who live in the 1948 territory, between brackets Israel, between brackets the Zionist state, who are living absolute fear in where they can go and where they cannot go. I was actually watching social media today on Instagram, where Palestinians who work in a fast food restaurant in Israel, in Tel Aviv, or some area around Tel Aviv, were attacked by Jewish youth, beaten up in the restaurant because they are Arabs, because they are Palestinian. And so this is something that we are fully experiencing, and everybody is living terror from this. Most of the Palestinians that I know who live in the 1948 territories are afraid to go into the common spaces of Jewish Israeli society. And it's not the religious, it's just the Tel Aviv, Tiberias. I had friends, for example, who needed to get her ID renewed, and she's from a town called Fahm. And to get her ID renewed, she had to go to Tiberias, which was something she did every time. And she was talking about how terrified she was just to go to the Ministry of Interior in Tiberias, which is the main district from Fahm, and to get her ID renewed. And again, the government is doing absolutely nothing about it, or allowing it or supporting it to happen. So this is what we are facing. What is the strategy? This is what we need to talk about. What is the strategy for us? What is the strategy here? And this is why one of the things that we are offering is these spaces where Palestinians come together and connect and build identity and camaraderie and support for each other. How do we do this? How do we engage in this? How do we address these issues? Because this is a full-on apartheid system. Right? There is absolutely no discussion about it. And it's beautiful because no Israeli leaders even now claims to be a democracy anymore. They're like fine with this being called apartheid. That's why it's okay to call it apartheid here, by the way. It's because the Israelis gave the green light. It's okay if you want to call this apartheid. They have to approve everything. I'm kidding. I hope I'm not. I don't know. But it is very, very challenging. It is very challenging. An Israeli, a Palestinian friend of mine, she is a lawyer. And on October 7th, October 8th, she put a post on her Facebook, and the post said, "Good morning, Gaza." That's it, "Good morning, Gaza." And she has been in trial since that day until the beginning of this year, and she was disbarred by the Israeli bar because of the statement called "Good morning, Gaza." So we are living, again, in a full apartheid system. And I think one of the things to begin to understand is when we begin to accept it and name it as apartheid, and acknowledging it as apartheid, like what you need to do here, then you can begin to move beyond it. But as long as we're debating Is it this? No, it's not that. It's only a few people. It's only this government. It's only because they're right wing. That keeps us in a loop of debate that we cannot get out of. And so for those of us who believe, let's call it what it is, and then locally begin to build a strategy around it.
Hi, Sami. Adam, thank you again. I had a question on the, I guess, sentiment of Palestinians towards like what you're working towards, because this two-state solution is, so many Democrats in the U.S., even the well-meaning ones, keep saying we're fighting for a two-state solution, which seems, like a farce at this point. A one-state solution seems almost even more unrealistic. And I remember seeing polling from several years ago, even before October 7th, saying the majority of Palestinians would rather just have a one state with everyone with equal human rights. And my question is, what are you all fighting towards now? Obviously, the status quo is completely unacceptable. As you said, it's apartheid. But what is the long-term vision? And that's something that I'm sure you're struggling with it. I have a problem with two-state and one-state solutions. I don't even know what to be fighting for except for the end of the occupation. So I'd love to hear your opinion on it as someone who's on the ground there.
It's going to be fun working with you, Adam. We're going to have many talks. And it's another thing that puts us in a loop where we don't see what's happening. When we begin to fight and argue about a political solution, and then decide if I want to work with you or not based on the political solution that you say, if I agree with it or not. And so what I've been telling people as I'm traveling here is stop the BS. Don't talk, like I see many amazing groups here that are doing amazing work, but they don't even talk with each other or work with each other because this Jewish group supports the one-state solution, this Jewish group supports the two-state solution, so they don't talk with each other because of that political ideology or whatever they believe. And I would say at the end of the day, it is for us, the people who live in the land, that we need to decide what is the right and just political solution for us. It's not a debate to happen here. I'm not going to come to the US, even though I'm an American, I could do this. I could debate with you if this country should become 2 or 3 or 50 states. And I know many people are having this debate. It's a local debate. When I move to the US, I will have this debate. And so there's never been an interference in other countries' political solutions. When the South African liberation movement was happening, what was their slogan? End apartheid. End apartheid. We want you to end apartheid. Do everything you can to end apartheid. We didn't discuss, they had discussions there in South Africa. Should the Bantu stands be independent entities within the framework of the South African government, like the two-state? They were talking about it over there. Nobody here was talking about this. So they pushed a debate for us to distract us. So we're saying, what are we fighting for? End occupation, end apartheid, end injustice, end genocide, end Zionism, an ideology that creates separation and segregation. Whatever that end is, this is what we need to be engaging in. And then to trust that when these systems of power collapse, the people, the power of the people, will decide the right political framework for them.
Great. Good. I'm just going to ask a question. Sami, let's focus some attention on more nonviolent resistance. Can you talk about some of the nonviolent resistance groups that we support in Gaza to show the range of kinds of nonviolent resistance tactics that are out there and that we're supporting?
So, if you don't know Nonviolence International yet, visit our website and see the amazing partners that we sponsor, support, and for us, they are partners. There are many fiscal sponsorship organizations out there, but these are real partners that we engage in. We support, we train, we are there for them and support them. And in Gaza, it's been beautiful to support sort of 3 layers of engagement with the Palestinians. One, amazing people that we support is a group of people called Dignity for Palestinians that provide humanitarian aid work, medical support, food, medicine to the local Palestinian community. They're doing amazing, amazing work. Another second tier level of organizations we support is the organization that talks about narratives, the stories, the experiences, the expressions. We Are Not Numbers, if you've heard of them. They've recently published an amazing book. And so addressing the aid, addressing the narrative, the story of what is happening in Gaza. And the third, of course, group that we love and love working with is the Flotilla movement, the Freedom Flotilla, the U.S. boats to Gaza. So it has the humanitarian aspect, the human face aspect, and the resistance aspect all coming into one place. And then this is what I love about the work that we do, because we try to create a comprehensive, holistic understanding of this work. To support groups, for example, that like the Unarmed Civilian Protection Presence in Palestine, internationals coming to be supportive of Palestinians, but at the same time supporting the Center for Jewish Nonviolence, which is about Jews coming specifically and standing with Palestinians and voicing their resistance to the occupation at the same time. So these are different aspects of advocacy and presence that we also support and engage in. And many other organizations, of course, that you know. So it's been an honor to feel so connected to all of these organizations as well.
So I get all that, and when have and how can the Palestinians engage their neighbors to cooperate and join the resistance? There doesn't seem like many people have been reaching out to the Saudis, and the Emiratis. UAE now has normalized relations with it, like all this was happening in 2020, and no discussion of Palestinians ever at that table for the Abraham Accords. Is that accurate, that Palestinians were never at the table? So where do we go from here? I mean, Palestinians and others supporting.
Yeah. So I'll divide your question into two questions, because it's very important to address them in two levels. The first and the biggest tragedy that we have, to answer the question differently, is when will Palestinians unite? When Palestinians come together and begin to break their divisions between different political factions, different groups, and to say, we are going to put this on the side and come together. Again, this is an existential threat for all of us. We're all going to suffer and die if we don't come together in unity. This is our failure. It's not the Arabs. It is the fact that we still have a Palestinian Authority that is ready to kiss bleed to have their ability to stay in power. The fact that the Palestinian Authority came out a few weeks ago, out of nowhere, and kind of gave this yellowish blessing to the Board of Peace.
Oh no.
Because they wanted to have, can you have the crumbs of the pie in it? It was so embarrassing, so shameful for us as Palestinians. And so this remains still our biggest challenge. Our liberation is being halted and hampered by a leadership that is doing everything to stay in power, even though ultimately they are going to be kicked out of power as well. And they've had this experience before, and they know it, and they still believe that this time is going to be different. October 7th and everything that happened after October 7th was a big wake-up call for many Palestinians who were feeling this, but now we're seeing, to go to your point, that we are in this on our own. There is no Arab unity around this. There is Arab symbolism, there is an Arab narrative around this that is used by Arab leaders less than before, because it was the rally call to use Palestine for their own people. So not even that is happening much anymore. And the fact that since October 7th until this day, security cooperation, trade, security cooperation with the Arab Emirates, trade with Jordan, gas with Egypt, continued. And so I think many Palestinians are waking up and saying, yeah, this is our struggle on our own. We fully understand that the people in these countries understand and are standing with us and know the tragedy. This is not about the peoples of these countries, this is the leadership. And many people are afraid of their leadership in their countries. But we know ultimately, if the people rise, things will be different. We can't expect anything from Arab leaders.
Two more questions.
Coincidence, you just answered the first question I had about the Palestinian Authority and what can be expected.
Yeah.
Basically nothing. The second.
I mean, at one point, like I always feel I need to give them some credit for something. I don't know what. But on one level, they are between a rock and a hard place. And they put themselves there. That's why I don't want to give them credit. Because they can say, we will stop doing this. And we give the keys back to the occupation and let them do what they do. But they are in a difficult position, and they're getting a lot of money and power from just being what they are. Yeah.
My second question was going to be what Palestinian non-governmental organizations are you looking towards for help? Organizations like Excellent, for instance.
What Israeli organizations?
Yes.
Yeah.
Which are the ones that you really look up to
Yeah.
and counter or support? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. So the two that come to my mind immediately are B'Tselem and ICAD, Israeli Committee Against House Demolition. Jeff Halper, I think you know him, you've heard of him. And there are other organizations. One of the organizations that we're engaging in discussions with, which is a growing movement in Israel, is called Standing Together. You may have heard of it. There are many questions, many challenges, a lot of the conversations that are happening. But I think one thing that we also need to look into is maybe our partners do not have to be exactly 100% where we are. Because again, this is part of the division and conquer method that they use. And so one of the conversations that I'm having with people from Standing Together, because you have probably seen them engaging in many activities, trying to get aid into Gaza, blocking different things, engaging in including now coming in and creating protective presence for Palestinians in Area C. So one of the discussions I'm having is not to say let us come together and do activities together, because I don't think they need, again, the token Palestinians to do this. If they believe in it, they'll do it. But when we talk about nonviolence, a lot of the nonviolence that we engage in, knowing it or not, is what we call reactive nonviolence. We begin to see something happening and we react to it. A lot of the nonviolence, for example, in Area C now, that's where settlers violently are attacking, killing Palestinians, maiming Palestinians, destroying Palestinians, communities and villages completely destroyed in the last few months by these extremists. I actually say don't call them settlers anymore, call them Israeli Jews, because they are part of the Israeli Jewish community. They are supported by 80% of Israeli Jews. They're not the fringe extreme group that we used to talk about in the past. And so to see Israeli Jews commit these acts of violence, so one of my discussions with Standing Together now is saying, instead of bringing hundreds to react to what these, again, to use the word settlers, are doing to us, what are you doing proactively to make the life of these people difficult? Because part of what we actually learn in Nonviolence 101 is to make life difficult for those who are committing violence. And we kind of forgot that. Michael talks about that in his book. It is making it difficult. How do we make the life of these people difficult? Are we blocking the streets by having thousands of people lay on the ground in front of these, again, settlements? Are we, I've suggested many things to them. Blocking streets, puncturing our cars, their cars, Israelis. It's nothing to do with us Palestinians. And they're on the roads, or something that I know is everybody, and I know including you, driving very, very slow on their highways. You know, the roads that lead to the south just have 2 cars on the road and drive really, really slow. Just make it difficult for them, make it annoying for them to be there. So this is where, like, some of the groups that we could talk with, if they are ready to engage in action. And we might not agree, again, on the 1-state or the 2-state politics that they have, but if they're ready to engage in direct action, I think we need to support different groups.
Our last question.
Well, your last comment brought up 2 questions for me. One is making their life difficult. What do you think of the 40 countries that came together in the Hague group, and they said one of the things they should do is investigate, I don't know how they do it, Israelis coming into their country to see if they were involved in war crimes and not let them in if they were, as a tactic. But my main question was, it's been 20 years now since the nonviolent boycott, divestment, sanctions movement has been going on globally. And to me, it doesn't seem like it's been very effective. So what is your evaluation of BDS?
So I will go to the second question because I think we agree on the first one. The second question, I say continue, continue, continue. BDS needs to happen, needs to grow, needs to continue. I historically have had challenges with the Palestinian BDS movement because part of the Palestinian BDS movement, what they did was to begin to attack different Palestinian organizations that may not have advocated for BDS the way they wanted, not even at the same level, but the way they wanted. And I've had many requests to engage in discussions and dialogue with Palestinians to really come together and strategize on BDS. Boycott, divestment, and sanctions is a nonviolent tactic. It's not the only one, because again, part of that mindset, as I began by saying, we think our way or the highway. And, you know, 346 tactics of nonviolence that exist out there. And so we need to look strategically, where does maybe BDS work and where it doesn't work? Which organizations and companies we can achieve results with, which ones we can't achieve results with. It's not like an emotional reaction as a tactic. It has to be proactive, it has to engage, and it has to be inclusive. So for example, there are people that are ready to, just to use an example, not to say this is something I know, to say BDS and dialogue. Let's boycott and promote for boycott. At the same time, let's create space for conversations to happen. Some people in the BDS say no. It's either boycott or nothing. And if you engage in dialogue, we will attack you. It hasn't helped us. And so for BDS to be successful, I believe, and I agree with you, it hasn't worked. It has to become part of a comprehensive strategy that invites all the different groups to come together. If you, as a group of people or as a movement or an organization, believe that protest and demonstration and direct action is the way to do it, be blessed, go do it. And I'm going to say, if you as an organization believe in dialogue, in the real essence of dialogue, and one of the things that we have written is actually a manifesto for Palestinians how to engage in dialogue. Because most Palestinians who go to dialogue don't even know what they're doing. So dialogue can actually be a powerful weapon. But we have failed in dialogue as well. We failed in everything. So if we agree that these are sort of the values and the tenets and the outcomes that we expect from dialogue to happen, then go for it. And people who believe in boycott, go for boycott. I met with Desmond Tutu in South Africa, and I was honored to have a private meeting with him. And because this was a big issue for me, I asked him. I said, South Africa engaged in BDS, and it was successful. But how did you personally deal with the Afrikaners, with the white in the land, when they came? And he kind of knew what this question was because he probably got it many, many times. Without blinking an eye, he said, I never shut my door. If somebody wanted to come to me and to hear, again, my grievance, my pain, my sorrow, wanted to learn, I never shut my door. And at the same time, he was also promoting BDS. And so I believe in it, and I believe that we can do it. And I think with the way things are moving now, BDS is going to become a more popular tactic to engage in. The more states that make it illegal, the more people that will actually do it.
Thanks everybody. Thanks everybody for coming.
Yeah.
Do we have any other announcements for any other kinds of events coming up? Mubarak, did you want to say something as our elder here? Did you want to finish up? Did you want to say anything? No? Okay. Good. Does anybody have any announcements of events?
Yeah, we do need to disagree with one thing. I just heard Sami say you've been a failure in everything.
Sarah, your auntie has to disagree. That when you said we've been a failure at everything, Palestinians have produced magnificent young people, wise beyond their years, eloquent spokespersons, and you are a representation of that.
Yes, Mary.
I just want to say we lost Colin McCarthy this week.
Oh, Colin McCarthy left us, and he got